My name is Gigi Carminati. These are the C2 Space Chronicles, where we show you the messy, experimental, uncertain side of studying human physiology in extreme environments. We left off with the idea that we were going to head to Bonaire and do a pilot study on nitrogen narcosis, and we were just going to use a DSST to figure out, how cognition is affected underwater. Now, we don't expect to get any great data from this. We're just trying to see the logistics of how it works. So when we do go out and get subjects, or when we go apply for funding, we can tell them, hey, we tried it. We have some idea of what works and what doesn't work. So here I am sharing with you what went right and what went wrong, and what we're going to change as we move forward with this project. So the first thing is that grease pencils work. I was so excited. Grease pencils work. I mean, they work in theory. There's some issues with them, which I'm going to get into, but they worked. So here are the things with the grease pencil. They write underwater. So that works. I don't know that they're reliable enough to look at correct throughput, because they're pretty blunt. And so the symbols we were trying to use, some of them were kind of fine. And we kind of lost a little accuracy. So we basically, you'd have to be like, I think this is what they meant when they were writing the symbol, but it's not like quite clean. So I have there's a little bit of a question mark in that. The one thing that was problematic is that they fall apart underwater. And so there were little pieces of paper floating everywhere, which made me feel like, like an terrorist, because it made me feel like I was just destroying the environment. So what we actually ended up doing is that we taped them up with electrical tape so that they wouldn't fall apart underwater. And then the other thing is that there's no way to sharpen them. And so we basically went down with like 4 or 5 pencils so that each of us basically could use a new one. So as they got blunter, we could just get onto using another one. So those were a little bit the shortcomings, which we hadn't thought of before we used them. The other great thing was that on the surface and underwater, actually, you can use the grease pencils on the laminated sheets, which I really liked, because then it means we can reuse them and it's not as bad for the environment. You don't have to throw away paper each time. On the other hand, the issue of them not being fine enough and precise enough when you write actually kind of gets magnified, because while they do technically write, it's not great writing. And so underwater, I wouldn't necessarily use the grease pencils on the laminate, on the laminated paper, but you could use them at the surface. So that was kind of a nice way to maybe use 2 different things: laminated on the surface so they can be wiped down and reused, and then only limit maybe the waterproof paper for underwater, so we're limiting the damage. The lift bag was overkill. We did not need it. We nixed it after the first dive. That was not helpful. The mesh bag, though, was a great idea. The mesh bag was fantastic. Kept all of our stuff in the little bag. We went down, we went up. So that's definitely going to be kept. The clipboards were great. Absolutely necessary. Super important to use. A bit of a problem that they get warped because they're underwater. We used wooden clipboards. I hadn't thought of that. So no wooden clipboards anymore. They also get filled with water, so they start getting a little bendy underwater. Anyway, it worked fine for the time that we did it. We would not use them long term. So plastic clipboards, unfortunately. Plastics for the ocean. Not, we do what we can. And then we tried to use pencils. Oh boy, pencils don't work. Just a regular old pencil on the waterproof paper did not work. If you know of a brand that does work underwater, if you've done this before, let me know. But the pencils with the brands that we tried did not work. So it's grease pencils or nothing. So we were able to do 2 runs, which was very exciting. One of them was at night. Very interesting experience doing this at night. And it gave us a total of 18 data points. For the first one, we did tries at 6 meters, 40 meters, 40 meters, 10 minutes later, and then at our 6 meter deco stop. And we mostly got data, which means that it worked. I've taken you this far. So now let's talk about the science behind this, the papers that we actually looked at when we were putting this together. So first, there is a 2021 study by Karakaya et al., where they used 20 divers and the exercise consisted of mouse clicks. And there was a statistically significant false positive click rate, which indicates that there was some incorrect responsiveness to stimuli. Subjectively, most of the subjects said that they had mild or moderate symptoms of first-level nitrogen narcosis, which included mental dysfunction, lightheadedness and euphoria, retardation of decision-making during their deep dive. But this is self-reported, right? And we're trying to get away from the self-reporting. So in addition, some participants reported dizziness, finger tremors, inattention, but they also reported that these were very mild and then they disappeared following the session. In 2022, Vrijdag et al. Conducted a separate study, and this one, the goal was to perform a psychometric test to see if there was a physical impairment caused by nitrogen narcosis. And unfortunately for that study, the results were inconclusive because the p-value was 0.14. Then in 2017, Steinberg and Doppelmayr gave 3 executive function tests to look at inhibition, task switching, and a simple reaction time test. And they had 20 recreational divers. So this study was actually conducted underwater, which is great. And it was conducted at on land, 5 meters and 20 meters. So immediately that 5 meter and 20 meter gives me pause, because it's not where traditionally we understand nitrogen narcosis occurring. But even then, the only statistically significant change was for the Stroop test. And the Stroop test looks at inhibition. So I don't know how much that really tells us. Like maybe you're less inhibited. Okay. However, there was a number letter task, which was supposed to look at task switching. And then there was a 2-back test, which is a test that actually looks at your working memory. So the 2-back test is where you are looking at different symbols appearing. And then if a symbol appears that is the same, like in the same place, for example, in the same place as 2 symbols back, then you click yes, right? So you're trying to remember what happened 2 symbols back, 2 triggers back. And there again, no change. So that would indicate that there is no change in working memory. But again, I'm not altogether surprised by these results because they're looking at 20 meters. So I don't think it was very informative. In 2014, which was 9 years ago, Hobbs et al. Did a study where they specifically looked at memory impairment. And the subjects there were given a list of words, 15 words, and then they were told to stop looking at it. They did something else for 2.5 minutes, and then they looked at it again. And this was a chamber study, and the subjects were at 42 meters. And so the idea was, how impaired are you at forming new memories? At the same time, subjects were also asked to assess their own narcosis. Specifically, they were asked to assess whether they would be unable to recall. So the study came up with 2 things. First, the study found that there was some impairment in forming new memories, but it also found that subjects were really good at self-assessing that they would not be good at it. So there was a very good correlation between how someone thought they were going to be impaired and their actual impairment in formation of new memories. And that was encouraging to them because they thought, well, if people are, aware enough about their own, accurately aware of their own memory impairment, then maybe they can do something to compensate. But then in 2015, Hobbs went back to it, and Hobbs and Kneller, and they performed another study. And then in that study, they really focused in on the long-term memory. In that study, they found that there is, in fact, an impairment in the encoding of long-term memories, but not in their retrieval. So that was interesting because it means that maybe you're not as good at making new memories, but if the memories are already there, you can retrieve them. And that's relevant, right, to safety? Because maybe you won't remember all the stuff you did down there, but you will be able to retrieve the information that you need to keep yourself safe. So as we move forward with the study, based on some of that literature and some of the things we've been looking at, we're really going to start focusing in on the various domains we discussed, the difference between long-term, short-term memory, decision making, speed of decision making, and motor functions, because we really want to try to break down what does it mean to be cognitively impaired, and have we just been over generous and over broad with that particular term. So in the next video, what I hope to bring to you is changes to our research protocol. We are looking to incorporate electronic data collection. So we are looking to use tablets or phones in cases that can withstand 40, 50, 60, 70 meter pressure, and at the same time allows you to do touchscreen responses. And to expand on the tests that we are using. And very much so, I would like to focus on using the tests that have been used in other studies so that we are building on that body of knowledge. And so right now we are looking at a two-back, end-back, two-back test. Probably the DSST is a very good one. PVT, which is responding to lights. And then we are thinking that there might be one or two other tests that we may want to incorporate in there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it entertaining. If you are a scientist or a budding scientist, or if you're a grad student, keep going. It's messy and we get it wrong, and sometimes we get it right, but it's definitely an iterative process, and failure is part of science. And that's what I hope that you're going to get from these videos. My name is Juji Carminati. Thank you for watching the C2 Space Chronicles.